Welcome, listeners, to SHOCKTOBER! On the Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast, with myself, Cole Smithey, and this week's special guest co-host, of Wrong Reel podcast, Mr. James Hancock. Welcome, Mr. Hancock.
Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy that we are going to talk about The Descent. We've got a lot of ground to cover. I know it's very cheeky and probably a little guy-minded that I thought that the Bonito Blonde Ale would be appropriate for this podcast, but it's a good light beer, and there are definitely some blonde young ladies in the film, so I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, young blonde ladies we got Sweden and the Netherlands, Ireland, Scotland, England, and Hong Kong, all covered over the course of this movie. So it's a kick-ass international cast.
It's great. And watching it, I loved it. I saw it when it first came out, and watching it now, it really puts a fine point on why aren't there more all-female cast movies?
I mean, you have some in the works, like Margot Robbie's producing a superhero movie called Birds of Prey with an entire female cast.
Oh, interesting.
And
when's that due out?
I think they start shooting next year, but it's Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy and all the female characters from Gotham. They're all going to be like some villains, some heroes, but they'll team up for various missions and whatnot. But it's a really popular comic as well. So some people occasionally take notice of that. But I remember being at Sundance when this guy premiered, and I didn't get into the screening, but people were just losing their minds over it. And when I finally did see it, two siblings and I, we sat down one night. Are we allowed to talk about recreational mind-altering substances on this podcast?
You can talk about whatever you want. You can curse as much as you want.
We were in a state of
pleases you.
Yeah, we were in a state of altered consciousness induced by herbal jazz cigarettes, and not only were we enthralled by the movie, I think the best visible response of pure physical horror I've ever seen in any audience ever is when you finally get the reveal, like at the 56-minute mark, and my little brother was so scared, his leg started thrashing off to the side like Jabba the Hutt's tongue when he's being choked out by Princess Leia. He just goes, ah! Just losing his mind. So I'm a fan of The Descent, and I think it's one of the best genre films of the 21st century.
Okay, so I'll just mention a little more about this wonderful beer. Cheers, by the way.
Cheers. Nostrovia.
Let's taste this wonderful beer.
It is delightful.
Yeah. Very quaffable. Ballast Point Brewing, Bonito Blonde Ale, 4.5 ABV. It's what we're drinking, and it's going to do the job just fine. So, the writer and director, I think it's interesting that Neil Marshall had done Dog Soldiers before this movie, and I'm sure you're a big fan of Dog Soldiers.
I am, but I like The Descent way more.
I agree with that. But I do think it's interesting that, this movie is so female-centric and really captures a lot of great... It's well written. You feel comfortable with these characters that they are being true to themselves.
Yeah, they're not thin, one-dimensional stereotypes. And the actress who played Juno, who's from Hong Kong, but she was talking about how her name is Natalie Mendoza. She said it was such a relief to finally play a character who wasn't written as the token Asian. She's like, yeah, it's just a part that I'm playing, and I happen to be Asian. I grew up in Hong Kong, but it's not like, oh, we're going to have our generic one-dimensional stereotype we're going to insert into the narrative. They're fully realized, fully fleshed out characters, and they have interesting contradictions, and some of them are unreliable, some of them are reliable, some of them are a bit of both, and yeah, it's a remarkably well-written script.
It really is, and I like the big reversal. I guess there's a couple of reversals involving Juno, but of course the one where she doesn't really have what it takes after she makes a horrible mistake with her friend, and she doesn't really have what it takes to own up to that in the moment.
No, I think she might be the best written character in the movie, though, because it's one of those things where you can't really trust her with your husband. You can't really trust her not to stab you in the throat.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
In a fight against these crawlers,
oh yeah,
she's like Jackie Chan. I mean, she starts tearing them to pieces, whereas most of them just run screaming and run off into the darkness to God knows where with no exit in sight. She's one of the few that stands her ground and takes them on sometimes like 3 or 4 at a time.
Well, since you brought them up, now we got to talk about the monsters, because I think a lot of other movies have borrowed from this film. I know that there was a race when this movie was being made with another movie. Is it called The Cave?
I've not seen The Cave.
It has a very low rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Gotcha.
But I think they really rushed to get this movie. Neil Marshall rushed to get it made because they knew this other spelunking thriller horror movie was being made.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, in spite of the rush to get it made, and in spite of probably not world's largest budget with which they were working.
Oh, we got to talk about the monsters.
Yeah, it's an incredible achievement. I love the crawlers. The crawlers, they're not quite vampires. They're not quite people. They're just these strange, new, kind of subterranean bat people. They've been living under in the caves for so long. They're blind. They depend on their sense of smell and hearing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have like a radar sense.
But they're quite hungry.
Yeah, they're meat eaters. They're not vegans. They definitely are not afraid to eat giant animals that you can find around the Appalachian Mountains, which is great just seeing all that beautiful footage of the Appalachian Mountains, because you and I obviously were born nearby there. But obviously,
it was
all shot on a soundstage. Yeah.
No, it was all filmed in England.
Oh, the Appalachian footage is in England?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's stunning stuff. I loved it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It was very convincing, very lush. I really like
I was convinced.
The way the film opens, because it gets you hooked with this violent tragedy that occurs and sets up this character from childhood.
I mean, when you murder a little girl and her father in the first 2 minutes of the movie, you kind of set the bar pretty high in terms of what kind of movie you're watching. But what I love about this movie, and I think it's something that cannot be emphasized enough, is that for nearly an hour, it's just this kick-ass, amazing action-adventure thriller underground that could have just remained that movie and still been a razor-sharp thriller.
Yeah.
And then in the third act, they just twist the knife and introduce these crawlers. And I think you can find very few examples of that. Like Predator is a great action movie with great cast before the Predator arrives. Same holds true with The Descent. I think The Descent is the Predator of the 21st century, at least in terms of that kind of formula and structure.
I think, did 30 Days of Night come out after this film? Do you know? I have to look that up.
They would have to be right around the same time, but they're both circa 04, 05, roughly that kind of period, but I don't quite know the order of release.
I'll check that out, because the creatures share that clicking thing that they do.
Yeah.
And it seems like that this movie, I don't know, I would guess that this movie had come out before, not that it's a big deal, but I really like the lighting in the film, because they use the headlights that they have. There's some stuff where
they cheat, yeah.
where she's holding up the lighter and supposedly it's misting really hard inside the cave.
Yeah.
So if you were holding up a lighter, obviously that would not stay lit.
I think they at least try to create the illusion that every light underground is coming from either their helmets or their hats or their cameras or their lighters. And I think on the whole they do a pretty good job, but in the end we do see a hell of a lot that we probably shouldn't be able to see. But never at any point was like, how is that room so well lit? So the illusion held for me. My suspension of disbelief was maintained. Oh,
absolutely. So in checking, it's true. This film came out in 2005, and 30 Days of Night came out in 2007.
Okay, I think it's a much stronger movie than 30 Days of Night as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
it's funny how Neil Marshall, after this movie, I would have thought he would have become the next big genre superstar, like the next John Carpenter. But in a strange way, he's pivoted into becoming the go-to guy in TV. If you need to do a giant battle scene where you want champagne for the price of beer, whether it's Game of Thrones or Westworld, Neil Marshall is the guy they bring in. But he's got Hellboy coming out soon, and his poster for Hellboy is so badass and so cool. It looks like a return to the bravado and the intensity of The Descent. Because I think The Descent, in spite of it being an all-female cast, has more balls than almost any other horror movie of the 21st century.
Oh, I agree.
And the girls, they just sell it. Apparently, they spent at least a week just doing a lot of rafting and climbing and spelunking training together to bond, but also just to get lean and tough. These girls are so strong, and there's something about that wall climbing build where you're really lean and wiry. Never at any point when I was thinking, oh, these girls can't do that. You're like, oh, they can hang by 3 fingers from by one hand while trying to screw in yet another, harness.
Sure.
I mean, I completely bought all the stunts.
Oh yeah, no, they're an athletic little crew. I think we should talk about the writing of it, because it really is a brilliantly crafted story. There's it's a MacGuffin really, where she leaves the book in the car, because Juno, of course, cocky. She's like the cockiest of them all, and so she's the one who has planned the spelunking trip. And it's in this cave that is supposedly been unexplored.
Yeah, it's been discovered but unnamed and unexplored.
So she has this book that describes whatever this cave, the inside of the cave, and she leaves it in the car. And what a great little seed to plant.
Yeah.
Because you get that sense of betrayal. As soon as the other girls find out that she's been bullshitting them, that they're not even in the cave they thought they were going to.
And they, I don't know the proper terminology, but when you go climbing, you leave information about where you're going, where you're going to be, etc., so that if something goes wrong, they will come and find you. However, they've informed this service that they were going to someplace else. They've actually been dragged unknowingly into this completely unexplored terrain. And of course, one of the very first things that happens is this terrifying cave-in the world's most claustrophobic tunnel. I'm not claustrophobic. That scene makes me feel like I'm suffocating, being buried alive while I watch it.
It's so hard for me to watch. I'm a little claustrophobic. I can handle MRI machines, no problem. In fact, I have to go get in one tomorrow. But yeah, it's really intense. And when the girl loses I can't remember
the second rope bag.
Loses the second rope bag, and she's stuck. Boy, that is so intense, to be stuck in rock.
It's one of those things where you have to exhale, which is terrifying, to create enough space to slide out of one of those holes. But of course, I see the ceiling coming down. She's like, fuck the rope bag. We're getting out of here. And her friend drags her out. Yeah, being stuck underground, buried alive. I don't know if there's any. Maybe being burned alive, but yeah.
Oh no, there's a phone in the background. Please ignore the phone. We're just gonna let that sound go, just like
I just want to make sure.
Just like a little Shocktober festivity.
I want to make
just
sure
a little reminder for everybody to buy your Halloween candy.
I was terrified that it was one of my devices. So.
No, sadly, I've done the ridiculous part of leaving the volume up in my own home.
Well, as I was watching, there's a great documentary about the making of this movie, and I didn't notice this until I saw this documentary, but immediately after the cave-in, if you watch it very carefully, apparently, with all the dust settling, you can see in profile one of the crawlers moving and clicking away. None of the girls notice, and it's just like the briefest shining. I always thought you don't actually see the creatures till much later, but for the discerning viewer, they actually show up pretty early on. Of course, we see the bloody handprint near the entrance very early on, which is a little foreshadowing, but the creatures take their time before they make their presence felt.
Okay, so let's talk about these creatures. These little things, they can walk upside down.
Yeah.
They can climb upside down. They're white. They're pasty. They're grotesque.
They look like Nosferatu from the Murnau film.
They look even worse than that, because their eyes are all bulbous and closed over and
originally
cloudy.
They were going to have huge eyes, almost like a fish, like deep underwater, but the masks, they just weren't looking right. It just looked too fake and too plastic.
Yeah.
So finally they just said, let's just have the eyes be normal, but we'll just make them up. That way, or at least we're working with the organic eye as a jumping off point.
Sure.
But it went through a lot of iterations in terms of what they were actually going to look like.
And it's interesting to me that they used men and women, stunt people, to play the crawler. Is that what they call them, the crawlers?
Crawlers, yeah.
The crawlers. They're very creepy.
Yeah, they're not asexual. They reproduce, and so if you look closely, some of them have hair. The men are bald, but the girls have hair.
Wow, you have an acute ability to discern many details.
Yeah, it's all stuff
James.
that I ripped off from the documentary, because they call attention to all this stuff, and they did something cool where they kept the casts separate because they wanted the girls to see them for the first time during the moment when they're swinging the camera around inside that room and they finally see one over the shoulder.
That's genius.
And they even shot a few scenes where the girls didn't know the crawlers were there. Like early on when they're walking, you see one in profile kind of opening his mouth.
Yeah.
The actresses had no idea he was there.
Uh-oh.
And when they finally did meet one, they all shrieked and ran off the set. They're all kind of laughing, but it was a little intense when suddenly that thing was just looming behind them. Like, fuck! But that's hard to do in a set, to play those kind of games just because you got so much going on. There's so much work to do to try to engineer an environment where they will never overlap or meet each other. It's an interesting creative challenge.
So it's really a monster movie inside an action thriller.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's mostly just a kick-ass action thriller.
It really is.
Yeah, it's two-thirds an action thriller that just happens to have this little deal sweetener of these kick-ass crawlers at the end.
I guess my one complaint of the film, and it, I mean, I'm totally splitting hairs because the production design is incredible. They built all these, I think Pinewood Studios is where they built all this
six main
stuff.
sets, and they just kept like redressing them. Some with dust, some with moss, some with phosphorescent rock. But it was 6 sets.
Yeah. So, but my complaint is that I feel like as the movie goes along, I lose a little track of the characters, and for all the trouble that he went to create these fully fleshed out characters, I feel like you lose a little bit, and part of that I think is due to the restraints of the lighting, because it's very hard to see the characters a lot of the time.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw it, I think I've seen it 3 times now. The first time I saw it, when the central character stumbles upon the girl who is hit through the neck and you see her arm rise up, I remember at the time thinking, who is that again?
Yeah.
Like, I had that kind of pause and think,
Yeah.
oh, she's the one who got hit. But I was definitely, I feel like someone like Brian De Palma, they're an expert of like establishing the terrain and the geography so that you're never confused. You're aware of where all the characters are and what they're doing. Because there's so much chaos when they all get separated, some of them kind of get lost in the shuffle. So I can totally see that point of view because, yeah, I did have initial confusion the first time I saw it, but I was also just so scared. I was just overlooking any shortcomings.
Of course,
the
no.
movie
Definitely in the heat of watching it, and I love the way that the action just ramps up and things just get tougher, and you really feel like you're trapped in there with them. It's amazing.
Well, what's cool is that when they meet the monsters, it's terrifying, but what makes it even worse is they still don't know where the exit is. It's not like they're like, oh, the exit's there, we just got to get through them. They have this acute crisis where they know thousands of years ago there might have been a second exit because they found it on a cave painting, so it's not exactly the world's best drawn map. That alone is an overwhelming obstacle to find a hole underground and amidst thousands of miles of tunnels. But now they have hundreds of these creatures just clawing their faces off everywhere they go. It's insane. It's so gripping and so intense. And I think this movie, I think it has a solid reputation, but I think it should be bigger. It should be up there with like 28 Days Later or movies like that.
Well, what strikes me is, I said it before, is how great it would be to have a lot more movies with all female casts.
I mean, you get some like Ocean's 8 and stuff like that. But I think what you're asking for is how great would it be to have a lot of good movies with all female cast?
Well, there you go. That's true. That's true. Something that's not cliched.
Yeah, you can count on one hand how many great all-female action movies are that are really good.
Because Neil Marshall really sidesteps the cliches.
Yep.
And you have to do that regardless of whether you're using men or women or both or whatever. I mean, that's the key, really, is like you said, you have to, is it a good movie?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like he could have cast any actresses in the parts as long as they were good. Like, he didn't write any of them as like, oh, this is our lesbian from Kenya.
There you go.
This is our,
go.
where you just have like demographic data, and that's all there is to it.
Yep.
Each character is a living, breathing human being with all these little subtle nuances, and you really feel the history and the relationship between all these different characters.
Yeah.
Especially just in the morning when they're about to go out, like the way how some of them sleeping and they're hungover. But of course, Juno's out there like jogging. I mean, she is such a physical specimen. Everybody's still asleep. She comes in. She's doing like standing splits and things like that.
Split thing that she does is pretty impressive.
I mean, she's got a very disciplined body. She's got total control, and she's so athletic and so badass and so powerful. But it's not like she's just the athletic one. She has so much more going on.
Absolutely. So let's talk about I guess they call it the survivor trope, the girl survivor trope, a la
like Halloween and Friday the 13th and stuff like that. Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see Neil Marshall's influences. He's certainly pulling from these influences. And so, spoiler alert, listeners, I think we're probably...
Yeah, he said his favorite influences going into this were Alien, The Shining, and Deliverance. But I've seen a couple different references to what inspired him, but that's what he was kind of going for.
Yeah, the Deliverance one for sure.
Yeah.
That's very visible. And what are the other two?
Alien and The Shining. I don't really see The Shining influence, but
No.
but Alien and Deliverance, I definitely see.
Absolutely. Yeah, and from, I mean, I just love the way the thing is shot. Who's the cinematographer on this movie? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I've got my old IMDb right here, and the cast and crew. Slow internet connection. You might have faster on your laptop.
But the ending is the Americans got cheated. We got
Agreed. It's the vastly inferior ending.
Yeah, it's like, so tell the story.
Okay, so the movie, at the very end, you have one survivor. She's running away. She falls, and she basically kind of hits herself / knocked herself unconscious. And then suddenly, she sees light ahead, and it's this giant mountain of bones. She crawls up, the music's soaring, and probably one of the most euphoric moments in movie history as she bursts forth from the ground. We haven't seen natural light in an hour at this point, and we can feel this insane sense of relief as she rips out, runs down the mountain screaming and crying, much like the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, and also that whole rebirth thing where
she's like coming out of
coming out of the
womb.
grave.
Yeah.
Yes, with the hands coming out of the grave. Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful stuff. But as she goes careening off in her car, she turns to the side and basically sees like a ghoul of her friend that she just left for dead. And then in the American version, it stops. And we get this little image of them all posing together before they went camping. In the real version, at that point, we realize she's dreaming, that she actually knocked herself unconscious. That mountain of bones in the exit was not there, in fact. And she wakes up, sees an image of her daughter in a cake, and the camera just slowly starts pulling out, and we see that she's basically stuck down here. And it's almost like she's become one with the cave. It's almost like you don't quite think, oh, she's doomed to die down there. It's almost like she's finally found her true home. And it's so much more ambiguous and so much more ominous. And some people hypothesized none of the crawlers were even there. She just went crazy and killed all of her friends. Which I think is a valid interpretation. However, when Neil Marshall heard that, he said he'd actually at one point deliberately removed a shot that might have suggested that. But at least he was thinking along those lines creatively at one point.
Interesting.
But I love the idea of her basically becoming an even scarier denizen of this environment than the actual crawlers themselves.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. That's great. And it's, because we're talking recently on the show about Double Life of Veronique, and that, of course, we got Weinstein, and I felt like Weinstein improved the ending of that movie. That's just my thinking. But in this case, I definitely think that was a mistake. Sam Mccurdy, by the way, is the cinematographer's name, and he's done Game of Thrones and a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he worked wonders with this. I think those guys, like I said, they will give you champagne for the price of beer.
Yep.
And you can tell they just absolutely love every second of being on set. When you watch documentary footage of these guys working, all they keep saying is, I can't wait to be on set again. It's not the writing, it's not the cutting, it's not the exhibition. They love to be on set with the actors, building sets, coming up with practical effects. They love getting their hands dirty. And I think that's pretty rare because there's so many filmmakers, say like Hitchcock, who are like, being on set sucks, it's boring, and so on and so forth. They love the action and the intensity of being there, and it comes through.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, obviously the actors play off of that energy and that atmosphere. You set that tone on the set, and people want to play along. People want to really bring everything that they have to the show.
They said it was. If you didn't have that attitude, it would have been tough because they said the girls. They had to put up with a lot of physical discomfort making this. They said they're basically cold and sandy and dirty and muddy and bloody at all hours. And they said at the end of each day, one shower on set and then another shower in the hotel. And even then, you still had blood in your nose, blood in your nails. They were just filthy and cold and kind of uncomfortable throughout much of the process. So you got to have that contagious enthusiasm on set, or it just becomes
me.
Yeah, otherwise it just sucks.
All right, so I want to take a little side trek off of The Descent for a minute, just to talk about wrong reel.
Just say it like a Southerner, wrong reel.
Wrong reel.
Yeah.
I like it.
Because Yankees say wrong reel. I'm like, no, it's not wrong reel.
Uh-huh.
You sound like you're from Ohio.
So yeah, I want to hear about what's up with you. What's going on with
Wrong Reel? Still
Wrong
doing
Reel?
a lot of filmography episodes. I like trying to create episodes that you don't find elsewhere. And there are a lot of podcasts out there where they tackle a movie, and there are a lot of podcasts out there where they tackle new releases. And there are not a lot of them that are tackling film history. Like Karina Longsworth with You Must Remember This probably is the best film history podcast out there, where she'll basically narrate almost like chapters out of a book, entire sagas of film history. She's one of the best in the business. but I like tackling either trends like blaxploitation or movements, say like the French New Wave, or just the entire filmography of someone like Joseph Losey, like you and I did together, as a way of just offering something that it's hard to find in other places. And my guiding principle is find somebody who's a rabid fanatic on a particular topic and turn them loose, and hopefully their enthusiasm will be infectious to the listener.
So what episodes have you done recently, and what have you got coming up?
I got one on Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Pier Paolo Pasolini.
That's
my
coming
favorite.
out. That's coming out soon. Doing a big one about the New York Film Festival, which should be fun.
Oh, good.
I got some horror themed ones, like about like a Mario Bava double feature. Even got a Simpsons Treehouse of Horror one, where we're going to cover the first 10 Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, all kinds of, and I also try to have as much variety as possible. You know, whether it's movies from the 20s or movies from today, large, small, you know, TV, whatever. I try not to limit myself. As long as it's moving images, telling stories, it's fair game for wrong reel.
I like it. I like it a lot.
But yeah, I need to get you on to actually talk about the movie that your podcast is named after, because I've actually never seen Le Grande Bouffe.
Oh, it's such a great movie.
And from what I hear,
it's such a kick.
It appeals to all my perverse tastes and interests. So.
It's very perverse, and it has a uniquely surreal quality to it.
Yeah, I need to see it. It's one of those things where it's been on my radar. Did you tackle it with Jeremy Workman on yours, or who did you tackle it with?
No, that was back in the days of,
Mike
Lacey.
And he did Yakuza, I guess.
Yeah.
Yakuza.
The Yakuza.
Yakuza.
I'm working on a video essay for Filmstruck called "Living by the Sword."
Oh, nice.
And it's the original Harakiri.
It's a damn good movie. It's an insanely good movie.
It's so good. And Dragon Inn, I'm going to talk about.
I mean, Harakiri was remade like 10 years ago or so.
Takeshi Miike remade it.
Yeah, but the original one with Tatsuya Nakadai, I mean, that's... you can make a case for it being the best samurai film ever made.
Well, and what's interesting is that it's really an anti-samurai film.
Yeah. Like, it destroys all the romanticism surrounding Bushido.
Yeah. No, it's a tremendous film. And I have to say, you know, props to Takeshi Miike's version. I think that he did an admirable remake. Of course, you're never going to come near the quality of the original, because
some... Is it Kobayashi who made the original?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Matsuya Kobayashi.
I believe so.
Look how smart I am.
Yes, indeed.
So well versed.
There you are. Yes, it's set in 1609.
He did
Japan.
Samurai Rebellion as well, which is really good. Which also has Tatsuya Nakadai
and it's written
Mifune.
by the same screenwriter as Rashomon.
Gotcha. That makes total sense.
Doesn't that make sense? Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the storytelling, you really feel that.
There was something in the water. Japan in the 50s and 60s, they had a lot of good filmmakers. It's tough to beat.
So you were doing the New York Film Festival. What did you see at the New York Film Festival?
I saw the rough assembly of Orson Welles' unfinished film, The Other Side of the Wind, and Peter Bogdanovich and Martin Scorsese were there to discuss, which was pretty cool. Oh, my
goodness. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so Bogdanovich told all of his great Welles anecdotes, and he has lots, because Welles at one point was actually living in his house.
Wow.
So he knows his Welles well.
All right, give us a little anecdote. I want one.
Ooh, what is a good one?
I'll put you on a spot.
You just by asking, you have flushed them all right. Oh, well, there's one where he's talking about how Jake Hannaford, the main character, is played by John Huston, but it's about the last day in the life of a filmmaker. Even though it's not autobiographical, it's basically autobiographical. It's loosely based on Welles at that point. And Bogdanovich talked about watching Welles one night, having this internal struggle, talking about how, why can't I play the part? Why shouldn't I play the part? But John Huston, he's so right for the part. And you're just having this internal battle with himself, and finally decided, yeah, John Huston should play Jake Hannaford. And I will say this, Jake Hannaford in the movie is basically guzzling scotch the entire movie, and if you like scotch at all, it'll give you such a powerful thirst. The most intense hangover I've had in my 40s was after watching The Other Side of the Wind, because my friends and I went on an absolute bender of prodigious proportions, and I was hungover. I came home, was lying in the bathtub trying to just get the systems flowing, and I woke up completely nude on the floor with just my towel, no pillow, no blanket, just like a starfish just splayed down. But I blame it all on John Huston. I was trying to follow his illustrious example. But it was great seeing also Danny Huston was there, and he stood up, because Danny Huston also did the ADR for John Huston in the movie because he does a really great John Huston impersonation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. He's in a movie that I talk about on my walking tour, Birth. Andrew Glazer's Birth. You know that movie?
I have not seen the one Nicole Kidman, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been dying to see it because I like Glazer quite a bit. That's like the last one on the to-do list.
Oh boy! See, there's another. I'd love to do that movie on the
We
podcast.
can do that
with
on
you.
Wrong Reel, no problem.
Or on Wrong Reel, yeah.
Either or. But also I saw Battle of Buster Scruggs, which is an anthology.
Which I know you loved.
Well, I loved one. It's 6 films, by the way. It was originally a miniseries for Annapurna Television. Netflix picked it up, and it was going to be 6 episodes. They decided, you know what, we can tighten it, make it a feature. So it's their longest feature, like 2 hours and 20 minutes. With all anthology movies, it's peaks and valleys. The first one is my favorite movie of the year. It's only like 6 minutes long.
Oh.
And then there are 2 others on there that are almost as good, and a 4th that's pretty good.
Wait a minute. How long are the movies? Are they all different lengths?
All different lengths.
So how long are they?
The first one's heartbreakingly brief, and the 5th one's very long.
So
But the 5th is probably the most moving.
So how long are they all together? So which one is your favorite? Which one's
the
your
very first one, Tim Blake Nelson
first one's
plays
your favorite.
a singing, gunslinging
Love Tim
gambler.
Blake Nelson.
It's so funny. I haven't seen an audience like screaming in pain from laughter like this in a very long time. Where
Nice.
people were losing them, and also the Coen brothers were there, and they introduced the cast. Like Liam Neeson came out; he's like 9 feet tall, and it's just that was a lot of fun. I saw the New Claire Denis High Life.
Oh yeah, how's that? Oh yeah, who's in that?
Robert Pattinson and Julia Binoche.
Yeah, how's that?
Do you like Claire Denis?
Hit or miss.
If you like Claire Denis,
White Material, right?
that was probably her last really good one, like 10 years
see, that's
ago.
what I think. That's exactly what I said. That's her last good.
A lot of people walked out because it's really violent. And when Claire Denis gets dark, like Trouble Every Day,
Yeah.
she gets like dark to the point where it kind of is like genuinely upsetting.
Yeah.
Like The Descent is fun upsetting.
Right.
Claire Denis is like actually upsetting.
Yeah, feel bad. Upsetting.
Yeah. High Life is feel bad upsetting.
It's
at
your
times.
feel bad movie of
Yeah,
the year. We need a feel bad movie. They're great to watch at Christmas.
Yeah, but it's a very ambiguous, slow, 2-hour sci-fi kind of heady exploration of life on the fringes of space. Very depressing, very bleak, and like I said, some people walked out. But if you're a Claire Denis fan, you will absolutely love and adore.
Yeah, I have a really hard time walking out of movies. Although the first movie that I ever walked out of was Fantasia.
Interesting. I love Fantasia.
I love Fantasia, but it gets boring. The last third of it's a little boring, and it hit a rut for me.
I walked out of Cradle Will Rock, the Tim Robbins movie.
Oh, really?
I walked out of Big Fish,
Wow.
the Tim Burton movie.
Okay, let's go. I want to hear more.
What else have I walked out of? I walked out of that stupid Pixar movie Inside Out that everybody said was like the second coming of animation. I thought it was unwatchable.
Nice.
Left in like 30 or 40 minutes.
Nice.
But I love it. You always are trying to drag me to the dark side and feed on my
It's
my,
not
my
the
hate.
dark side, man. They don't call it film criticism for nothing. It's not called film praise.
Yeah, I just, life is short. I try to focus on the positive, but when I go to the dark side,
It's not going to the dark side. Everything can be critiqued. You have your flaws. I certainly have mine. There isn't a film made that doesn't. That's why, anytime something gets overhyped, it's a problem because there's no way it will ever live up to it because all somebody has to do, one little kid comes along with a hat
And
pin
just
and
poke
says,
it, yeah.
"Don't," and pop.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I guess what I try to avoid is surrendering to my more loathsome impulses where I get mean and nasty. However, some movies earn it and they deserve it, and you got to come out both guns blazing and rip them to shreds. So,
As you did with Venom.
I mean, that's just
Unforgivable.
unforgivable, beneath contempt. I wish to shit upon it from a great height. Because I'm a comic book fan. I've read comics for decades, and I was the target audience when that character was introduced.
Yeah.
So I know the first 10 or 15 years of the character
Yeah.
obnoxiously well. And if that movie is not tickling my funny bone, they're doing something dreadfully wrong. So, not to make it all about me, but I am like the core fan base for that character.
So give me a couple of high points of why this movie sucks so bad.
Venom, or
Yeah, Venom.
it doesn't know what movie it wants to be. It veers between the most generic, predictable kind of early 2000s superhero movie, like think Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, Halle Berry Catwoman,
Right.
Ben Affleck Daredevil, those kind of movies.
Yeah.
And the script was written in 2007, which is why it feels
So
old-fashioned.
it's half-hearted.
It just feels by the numbers, predictable, unimaginative, no ambition. But it also feels like every single filmmaker involved hasn't watched a superhero movie in over a decade, And whether people like the genre or not, every once in a while, one will come along that raises the bar for fans of the genre, where your expectations go up.
Okay, so tell me which superhero movie of recent months do you think has, if there is such a thing, that has elevated the bar?
In the 21st century, obviously everything kind of started with Blade, which is 1998, but 2000 you had X-Men, 2002 you had Spider-Man, so slowly but surely started getting a little better. 2003 you had X-Men 2, which was a little better. Then in 2005, I think you had Incredibles, that raised things. 2008, you had the double whammy of...
The Incredibles is animation, though, right?
Yeah, but it's still superheroes. And then in 2008...
No. You got to stay live action.
All right, well, in 2008, Iron Man and Dark Knight, because Iron Man brought in the MCU. Dark Knight showed us that you can actually make like a great crime thriller. Just happens to have superheroes.
Right.
2010 or 11, you had Kick-Ass, which is great R-rated superhero action.
Which I loathe.
Oh, I loved it to pieces. Saw it many times. 2014, you had Winter Soldier and Guardians, which are cool. When it comes to R-rated, Logan and Deadpool showed that you could do something quite different from the PG-13 family-friendly fare we've been getting.
I think Logan's all about indoctrinating kids into violence. Don't get me started.
Okay. Well, if I'd been a kid, maybe it would have successfully indoctrinated me into violence.
No, that's what the story is about. Well,
Gotcha.
and you know what I mean. That's like in the text.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it would have.
Yeah. I grew up as Wolverine's #1 fan, so maybe I got indoctrinated at an early age.
Yeah.
And then in recent years, the ones
although Hugh Jackman is amazing.
Yes, he's shredded. And in recent years, the ones that I've liked, I liked Infinity War. I liked Civil War. Like the Russo brothers, they tend to, between Winter Soldier, Civil War, and Infinity War, they are kind of my go-to guys when it comes to big budget roller coaster, cotton candy kind of superhero fare. But Venom, yeah, it's like I said, Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage, it's that level of just laughably awful, where it's cringe-inducing humor that thinks it's cute when in really it's like just... like I said in my review, Tom Hardy, who's trying his best, he reminds me of a guy who's drowning, and people keep throwing him kittens and babies and puppies that he has to try and save, and he only has but so many hands, and there's only so much he can do because he's just being consumed by all the mediocrity around him. And yeah, I despise it. And what made it more complicated is one of my closest friends is in Sony's international promotions team, and she was working very hard to push the movie and made $200 million in the opening weekend worldwide.
I don't think the movie is. I don't think you're hurting the movie.
I don't think I'm hurting the movie either.
At all.
But it's tricky when you review movies that your friends work on.
No, I hear you. You have to recuse yourself sometimes.
Well, my attitude always is that she would lose more respect for me if I were to do a bullshit review.
I would certainly think that's true. So The Descent is one of these movies that has had a sequel. Have you seen The Descent too? And it's made by somebody who did the production design on this movie. Is that right?
I think it's best left unseen because it dampens your enthusiasm for The Descent by seeing it, because it basically tries nothing new and is just trying to squeeze a few extra bucks out of such a remarkably original, exciting movie.
That's what I was afraid of.
And so I think you just let The Descent be The Descent.
Yeah.
And enjoy for what it is. Watch it on repeat. Show it to your friends. But leave The Descent 2 alone.
Yes.
In my humble opinion. Because this movie, it's so rare that a genre film also finds ways to make your imagination explode about kind of reading between the lines of the text. It's like little things when they find evidence of the previous explorers, like when they're trying to cross this cliff and they see a clamp in the ceiling from like 100 years ago, immediately in your head, you imagine like an entirely other story or movie that's taken place, and obviously did not end well, because if they had made it out, they would have named the cave and it would have been on a map and so on and so forth. And I like it when movies allow your imagination to fill in some holes, and it allows the movie to kind of breathe a little bit and grow a little bit and have some I couldn't
agree more. I think that's such an important aspect. I always think, one of my personal mottos in life is just, resonance, not redundancy. And this movie certainly has exactly the kind of resonance that you're talking about in spades. It really, there's layers to the suspense. There's nothing one note about this movie. There's a lot of layers of tension and suspense.
And it works on multiple viewings. Like, there's so many movies with a lot of jump scares where the next time you watch it, there's nothing there because you've gotten it out of your system and there has no surprises left. I might have had more fun watching it the third time than I did the first time, because I could just sit back and enjoy the ride. There's something about the combination of the look of the film with the music, with these marvelous performances, where everything comes together. There's nothing where I would say, they kind of dropped the ball here. I wish they'd maybe chosen another
Except
path.
when the stalactites wiggle.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Interesting. So you've got rubber stalactites. Yeah, that's definitely not found in nature.
But yeah, I mean, you're gonna have stuff like that. I'm not that much of a stickler, and I also think things like that are funny. I think that you need a little bit of levity, even if it's just intrinsic.
Yeah, and I guess once you love a movie, you start noticing the things like in The Godfather when they're moving Vito Corleone in his bed through the hospital, and his hand hits the side of a door, and you see Marlon Brando like jerk his hand up and stuff like that. You know, after a while, like, obviously Vito's in like a deep coma. He's not going to move, but you notice that after you've seen The Godfather 1,000 times, and so on and so forth.
Oh, that's a great little anecdote. I like that.
But also, one thing this movie does so well in terms, like movies are, I feel like a lot of times are about great sleight of hand and illusion, and the fact that we get so invested by things like the rope burn through the hands, or when that one girl sees the phosphorescent rock, thinks it's light, runs for it, ends up breaking her leg, and a bone comes out. You get some really gruesome, horrific stuff.
Yeah.
That you're so immersed and distracted by that, you're not even looking at where the magician's other hand is.
Absolutely. Or when Juno pickaxes her pal.
Yeah. Because you're so consumed with the combat. Like, oh my God, someone's coming behind. Shagoong!
Oh shit.
Yeah. It's and it couldn't have happened to a nicer person. It's like she stabs the nice one. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hardcore. It's so badass. And well, you always talk about overhyping or overselling. Are we overhyping and overselling, or are we just hitting that perfect sweet spot where we're just recognizing a very well-crafted genre film?
That's a good question. I don't know. I cannot be a judge of that. Obviously we're celebrating this movie because I think it's great that Neil Marshall wrote and directed this incredible movie that, by the way, has an all-female cast. He didn't. I don't think he went in with this, artificial idea that I've got to make an all-female movie or something. And I think that his genuine approach to the characters and to the subject, and this is the kind of thing that separates what people call a genre movie from a true classic.
Yeah, something that it's a weird thing where it both transcends and redefines the genre all at once, because you could easily make a case for this movie appealing to people who typically don't watch genre films.
Yeah.
But for people who like genre films, like, this is a real genre film where it pleases a variety of different audiences. But you know what the unofficial title for this movie was when they were making it behind the scenes?
Yeah, it was really bad. What was it?
6 Chicks with Picks, and I think it should be the subtitle beneath the descent. But
wow.
It captures it's 6 chicks. And they all have picks, and they use them for climbing and killing and whatever.
But that would have put the wrong tone. See, this is why things like posters and whatever the taglines are so important, because it really sets your expectations.
Absolutely.
And if something, and of course, now we're not beating around the bush anymore about the poster. It's one of the best posters that's ever been made.
Yeah,
where it's the 6 girls with all their climbing gear on.
That Philip Halsman photograph of Salvador Dali called Dali and Voluptate Moors. I can't speak Latin, but
okay,
that's the official. It was about Dali posing beside those 6 girls, like a buck-ass naked as a skull.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poster. And it was kind of done in Silence of the Lambs as well, but when you watch the behind the scenes, you see just how saucy and filthy a lot of the on-set conversations were. And I think it was mostly led by the Irish member of the cast.
Sure.
But the little things like they were calling, there's this one, the place when she falls through that hole and breaks her leg.
Yeah.
They were calling that the vagina, and there you could see all the girls on set having fun shoving things into the vagina. And they're like, "What's your line?" It's like, "What's your line going to be in the movie?" It's like, "Well, it's a tight fit, but I think I can fit," and things like that. And so they're just having so much fun with all the dirty sexual humor on the set. So if anything, I feel like the girls were kind of leading the charge on that front.
That's great. Yeah. Well, if you got to be covered in sticky, syrupy, fake blood all day and.
Is it worse to be sticky and hot or sticky and cold? Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like 120 degrees with like rotting meat all around.
I think that's the worst.
Yeah,
I think that's the worst.
Because then you can smell it. At least when it's cold, it dampens the smell a bit.
Yeah, I think when it's that rancid.
Yeah.
We did Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the show, and we talked about that final scene, how it was shot, and yeah, it's just disgusting. That's just so.
Yeah,
gross.
I'd rather shiver a bit than be passing out from the stench. Like, we feel nauseated. I was an assistant to one of the producers on the film Hannibal, and Hannibal's a scene at a fish market, and we shot this giant action scene.
Oh, in Richmond?
Yeah, in Richmond.
Oh, I remember when that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was being
downtown.
filmed there.
Yeah, we shot for like 2 weeks though in this fish market, and they weren't necessarily bothering to replace the fish every day. So Richmond in the summer, if you have fish out on display, you could smell it from like basically like the western tip of the fan all the way down to Shockoe Bottom.
That's a long way.
And
That's more than a mile.
It was so gross, and people were basically begging for any and every excuse to go to the production office or go location scouting.
What were you doing on that film?
Branko Lustig, one of the producers, I was quote unquote his driver, but credited as his assistant. It was my second paid gig out of college working for Branko.
Wow. And how was that shoot?
Oh, it was a blast. I mean, I went from working at the William Morris Agency, which I hated, to working on a Ridley Scott movie, which I loved. Didn't love the movie, but I loved the experience.
Sure.
And it was just...
And who's in that movie?
Anthony Hopkins, Julianne Moore.
Yeah, Julianne Moore.
Yeah, a bunch of great people.
And from The Goodfellas.
Ray Liotta.
Ray Liotta.
I had a nice little exchange with him. He was cool because he found out that I'd arranged for tennis lessons for Ridley Scott at Country Club of Virginia. And he's like, oh, you're just a spoiled little rich kid, aren't you? And I'm like, you know what? From you, I'll take that.
Nice. Yes, yeah. I love it when he's taunting Julianne Moore and he calls her corn pone.
Yeah.
They're sitting in the dining room. Isn't that the one where they take off the top
Take the skull cap off, yeah. Which was all done on CGI. He just had this little blue beanie on the entire time. It was a little blue screen beanie. So it was like wearing like a little like swimming hat. And he looked ridiculous. So everybody's just looking at it with like total comic relief. So yeah, there are no brains on the set. But that was a really fun experience. But also, just since I knew Richmond, it made me a resource for a lot of people on the crew that was helpful to a lot. It was like half the crew, a large chunk was from London, a large chunk from New York, a large chunk from LA. But we had a lot of kids from Richmond that were working on it as well, and it was a nice hybrid crew.
Well, I'd like to bring this episode to a close. I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Hancock, for coming on the Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast, to celebrate this wonderful film, The Descent. It's perfect for Shocktober because it is such a creepy little ride. Super fun movie. It's streaming. You can rent it on Amazon. I think I paid $2.99 to rent it on Amazon.
I bought it forever.
Oh, you got it, Mike.
Yeah.
And I want to give a shout out to our friends in cities like Seattle, Sarajevo, Los Angeles, Redmond, Washington, Singapore, and Akron, Ohio, and in countries like India, Italy, Canada, Egypt, France, and Germany. For listening to us, please remember to turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie. And also, please contribute to us on Patreon. Just go to colesmithy.com and you can hit that Patreon button and get all sorts of rewards for giving us as little as $5 a month.
When are you going to start posing naked on your Patreon?
No one wants to see the Cole naked.
I want to see Cole Smithey. Buck-ass dude fighting crawlers with a pickaxe in each hand.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see about that. More on that, maybe never.
Well, if you want to get pictures of me naked, you can listen to Wrong Reel, which is available on all the usual platforms, or my YouTube channel, Geekin' with James Hancock, where I mostly talk about TV shows, but I also talk about flicks as well. My Mandy review is actually doing pretty well, so...
Yeah, and on YouTube.
Indeed, yeah, Geekin' with James Hancock. Just look for James Hancock, you'll see the bald-headed dude, and that is me.
Geekin' with James Hancock.
Indeed.
All right, buddy, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.